Welcome to the Gravel Lot, the place where bikes are for everyone.
The Gravel Lot podcast is presented by Be Free Ride Bikes Apparel, providing a fully customized cycling apparel experience to provide you and your team the attention to detail and personal touch that you deserve.
And also brought to you by Grimpore Brothers Coffee, offering handmade coffee roasted weekly in small batches to give you the finest quality coffee to start your day. Choose their subscription service and earn your free bag of coffee today.
And by Hand Up Gloves. Great gear, better times. Providing a wide range of apparel for bikes, snow sports, and golf in multiple designs and fits to let your personality shine.
Our goal with the Gravel Lot is to inspire cyclists of all stripes to ride bikes, share their story, and have fun. We love all bikes and anyone who wants to ride them. So no matter where you sit on the spectrum of bikes, we'll always have a place for you in the Gravel Lot.
And now, the hosts of TGL, John Woolry and Doug McClintock.
Hello and welcome back to the Gravel Lot, or welcome to the Gravel Lot. I'm John, that's Doug, and we are so happy that you joined us once again for another episode of TGL. So what is this thing? What is TGL? Why are you calling it TGL? Why are you calling it the Gravel Lot? Well, first off, Gravel Lot's a place where you meet all your friends before, after, or
during.
Hopefully not during, because it's probably
means you have a flat. Yeah, it's definitely not good.
A great bike ride. And that's where you catch up, you trade stories, you make fun of each other, and you really just bond and build community. And Doug and I, and I think everybody that's involved with TGL thinks that the only thing better than a bike ride is sharing one with your friends. So that's what we do. We share bike rides, we share stories, and we bring amazing people on and we let them tell your story. Tell their story, not your story. That'd be weird.
I mean, maybe they could.
That'd be really like ESP. Like that's next level, like Elon Musk interneting, I think. It's sure. Like somebody comes on and tells you your story. Anyway, we bring amazing people on to you every other week so they can tell their story to you. Hopefully you can relate to it. But either way, it's really just sharing this amazing community that we have around bikes and kind of giving you an opportunity to hear great stories and be challenged in life. So whether you are a new Pebble or an existing Pebble, first off, thank you so much for joining and continuing to listen and support this thing. If you're a new Pebble, welcome to all. If you like what you hear today and want to show your support, hit the like button, hit subscribe, follow, engage on all the socials, all that stuff. Share the show with your bike friends. If it's something that you're down with and you're like, ooh, this episode's real good, make sure to share it with your bike friends. That's how new people find us. Be sure to leave your comments in the chat if you can. Visit our website, check out our Patreon, check out our Etsy store, all that sort of stuff. We would love to have your support and make this happen. And go visit all the partners that were mentioned in the intro. They are amazing and allow us to do this. If you want to send questions, information like that, we've got a contact form on our website. You can do that. Social platforms are great, or you can call us at 513-400-5577 and leave us a voicemail. Always a fun time to check the voicemail and see what crazy stuff has happened. Apparently our Fifth Third account was used the other day to buy something from a website that I will not list here.
Yeah, which is a great phishing technique. I do appreciate it. I did double take, and it was like, good thing I don't have a Fifth Third account with this podcast. So,
Doug, how was the ride this week? It
was good. Like 2 weeks. I actually rode my bike again.
You did?
Yeah, I actually rode my bike, and I think that was like probably it was a good moment, right? So I'm with our friend Christopher and with our friend Aaron, and
friend of the show,
guest of the show,
season 1.
Yeah, guest of the show, Aaron Kent. And
was like, oh, it's a 36-mile ride, more miles than I've done all year, probably combined.
But it's also spring in Ohio.
It's also spring in Ohio.
And it was flat.
It was flat, and it was like 800 feet of climbing, 36 miles. By mile 28, I was like, will this be over? Please soon be over.
All of those things. When I found out that you went and I knew what the route was, I was like, this is my ride. This isn't Doug's ride.
Yeah, no,
this is not enough vert, and this is too much wind.
Yeah, no, this is, and it was a lot of wind. And like at mile 30, when we turned back into the wind, I was like, I would like to die. I was just
I need a large person in front of me, please.
Well, and like all credit, Christopher and Aaron are dudes that could block the wind for me, right? Like both of them are like sturdier than I am frame wise, right? They're taller, they're sturdier,
stronger.
Right? They're strong. Well, I mean, that goes without a saying. Like you've seen the stuff Aaron Kent does, like that dude could lift a Volkswagen.
Yes.
And not without help. And so it's like this crazy, we make this turn and Christopher's up the road, just loving it because he's rehabbing from the shoulder injury. And so he's just like feeling his oats and he's killing it. By the way, most comfortable I have seen him on a bike ever. We can discuss that, but like looked comfortable.
Good.
Which is not necessarily how I would have described Christopher's riding style before, but he looked comfortable.
I'm still trying to find that.
Yeah, I mean,
10 years in and still trying to find that.
Me too. He looked comfy and it was excellent. So he was killing it and he's way off the front. And Aaron is sitting at like 11 o'clock, kind of blocking the crosswind, except there was no crosswind. And he's like letting off of pedaling and I can hear his hub. He'd be like, pedal, zzz. And I'm like slogging.
Isn't that so disappointing?
It's so sad.
It's so disheartening that you're like, I know. And,
right.
And Aaron is, I mean, both Christopher and Aaron are like Labrador personalities.
Yes,
they're both so
sweetest.
sweet, the nicest people. And Aaron he's always super positive on rides, even when things are just going completely sideways. And in those situations where it's like, I know you're being really nice to me, but that just, it like makes it like pours gasoline on that fire that's already like,
he rode with me and I was just like, still, I would like to now die in a hole. So the good news is though, I had a lot of fun and I'm excited to ride my bike again. So that's, so that's good.
Yeah.
So,
I rode mine with Amanda downtown. We went to go get food. We rode across the river and back. And,
nice.
And I did my first load. This was like a watershed. This tells you how like little both. Well, you doing 36 was your most mileage for the year. And then me doing a load of athletic wear for the first time. And it's April.
Yeah.
This past week.
Yes.
That's a statement.
But you know what? I'm decoupling my self from that because I don't know what this is going to look like after baby arrives.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
And to be fair, I've been riding the trainer in not bibs and I've been sweating all over cotton.
That's
whatever.
That's your own mistake.
I'm doing something.
Yeah. I haven't even been doing that, but yeah, busy at work and doing all that stuff. So at any rate, I don't want to belabor our riding because we've got way more important people.
Enough.
Yeah. And you got way more important people to talk to. So I'm going to bring in this week's guest right now, which I'm very excited to do. Hopefully see if my magic works here. Excellent. And there they are joining us right now. We are excited to have a long overdue episode in the books this week. We are joined by an amazing writer and human from the future and the other side of the globe.
Yeah, it's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow.
Even though we're recording this and posting it, whatever.
No. You guys are in the past. That's how it works.
That might be the wittiest comment that's ever been said on TGL for a whole host.
I mean, you're in America, so
it's true. It's true.
We're in the past for a lot of reasons. Yeah.
So she is a multi-time New Zealand downhill national champ. She's now focusing on enduro. She is a full-time medical products engineer, design engineer, which I'm very interested in finding out about, and an altogether rad human being. We got to meet her through our great friend Tara when she was on the Pink Blue White podcast last year, and we are super stoked to have Kate Weatherly join us in the Gravelot today. Kate, welcome to TGL.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure, definitely.
We are like over the moon. I was like, man, when we were looking at the summer, I was like, who do we need to get a hold of? And I was like, damn, God, gotta get Kate on the show.
Yeah, why not yet?
Yeah, why not yet? So we're stoked that we can make it work, and we will not bust your secret of playing hooky.
Oh, she's in an important meeting.
Yeah, no, this is critically important. I'm discussing the future of gravel and lots, and I can only assume also podcasts.
Sure,
for sure.
It's all on the line today, all of it.
So you've listened to the show, we kind of like to start in a certain place and ask people how they got into bikes, but I think your story starts a little bit earlier, and I think it's important to kind of line that out. For folks who don't know, you suffered from a diagnosis at a very young age of something that I can't say, but I'm going to try. Bronchiectasis. Am I? Nope.
Ectasis. Almost.
You forgot a syllable.
The problem is I can't do that. So this is a lung disease, and it affected you at birth. Was this something that like was diagnosed immediately, or is this something that you were diagnosed with when you were very young?
Yeah, so bronchiectasis is a chronic lung disease that typically occurs when there's damage occurs inside the lungs. So I was basically a poster child for why you should vaccinate your kids, because I got whooping cough and pneumonia at the same time when I was 3. Oh. And that caused a huge amount of damage in my lungs, resulting in bronchiectasis, which basically means the buildup of mucus in the lungs and the inability to clear that, which results in, if you get a cold, it's like a flu, and if you get a flu, you end up in hospital. So lung infections are really bad, and you get pneumonia every other week, basically.
Oh, as a 3-year-old, what a miserable, what a tough diagnosis, because kids pass colds like jelly beans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it was tough. I think from basically when I was 3 till about 10 years old, I was in and out of hospital pretty much every year at least.
Oh.
So do you remember that? Because I think that there's like a positive of having this as a younger child. Because I think back to the things that, I had scarlet fever as a kid, and I don't really remember that much about it. And I feel like if I got it today, I would be
scarred forever.
I would be like forever damaged, and I would make everybody around me miserable. Whereas when you're a kid, you're just like, I don't feel good, and I like try and figure out so I can go play with my friends again. So being in the hospital that much, do you have concrete memories from that? And do you still feel like you carry some of that with you?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think it has toned a lot of the ways that I've handled my life afterwards. I think that there are a few particular memories that really stick with me. I remember the time when I was most sick. I was 4, and I was in and out of ICU at the Children's Hospital in Auckland in New Zealand, Starship. And I don't remember a lot about that. I kind of remember the aftermath of that, because I didn't know this at the time, but my left lung collapsed during that particular hospital visit, and things were not going so well for me. So everyone was really nice to me for a good period of time afterwards, which was kind of quite an interesting change of pace. But I think the main ones I remember was I had a Christmas where I spent Christmas in hospital, and that was hilarious because all the kids on the ward all went home over Christmas. I was the only one who had to stay in over Christmas, and a local radio station came in to do a piece with the kids and give away toys and stuff, and I was the only kid on the ward, which meant I got an entire ward's worth of toys all for me. And it was just, I was stoked. Like, and my parents were like, oh, here's your normal Christmas present. And then like an hour later, it was like, and here is an entire room's worth of presents. And that was phenomenal. Like, so good.
Did you get to pick through and like be like, all right, I don't want this crap. You kids can have that. I'll hold on to this cool stuff.
Yeah.
And if so, do you remember one of those gifts?
Yeah, absolutely. The top notch one was I remember sitting, because, hospital wards are, quite long corridors. I sat at the very end of it in my little ass wheelchair with an RC car and just zoomed that thing up and down the ward corridors all day. And that was the good one. And it was like, it felt bad because like now looking back, I'm like, oh, that was definitely not the one that my parents got me, but like.
Yeah, you're speaking to John's other side hustle. John loves RC cars, so he's quite a good, yeah.
What a nerd.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Whatever. I'm good with it.
Yeah, we are all nerds on this podcast. It's fine.
At what point after wearing Lycra for hundreds of times in your life does everything else just become a little bit more dull in terms of how hard you nerd out on something?
Yeah, I mean, it's bikes. We're all nerdy at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, it's not in terms of like getting into the technique and the technology of it. It's very similar.
Yeah.
I mean,
cars and bikes. I mean, it's all stuff kids
wheels.
Do. Yeah. Whatever.
Learning how to steer, all this stuff. It's kind of all similar reaction.
Yeah.
So you had this diagnosis as a child. You had a whole series of this. Were you like athletic as a kid? Were you, or did this like just really impede all of that? Because I can't imagine that that it was like a glowing endorsement for you doing laps around the track,
Ironically, it was kind of, I almost want to say both, because I think that sports were definitely one of the things that in those times that I was in hospital, seeing the clinicians, they were basically like, you're never going to be able to play sports at any kind of reasonable level. If you get out of breath, you're going to have an asthma attack essentially, and your lungs just aren't going to work. Because I think that at the time I had about 30% of my lungs were damaged. So like a pretty significant portion of my lung capacity was limited. And me being the stuck up little brat of a child that I was like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity for me to do exactly the opposite of what these medical professionals are telling me to do. So through my young life, I basically did every sport you could possibly think of, like rugby, football, swimming, did ride some bikes at that time, archery, like everything. And the biggest one that really stuck with me through while I was in what you guys would call elementary school, we call primary school, so sort of first schooling life, was swimming. I competed in our school's annual swimming competition every year and came dead last every single time because, of course, I had no lung capacity, which is quite important for swimming.
Oddly,
yeah.
Unless you've learned how to breathe water, right? It's amazing. If you can't breathe water, you're going to need to hold your breath.
So if those doctors and clinicians had not made any mention of the things that you couldn't do, playing hypothetical right now, would you have like dug your heels in and done those things, or would you have done them just probably not as like pig-headed?
I think probably you're right. I think it was, I was lucky enough to grow up in a pretty privileged part of our country with a reasonably well-off family, and as a result I had easy access to things like school sports and sporting equipment if I wanted them, or parents were willing to pay for entries for swimming competitions, that kind of thing. So it was an easy opportunity for me to do those sports, and I think that part of the reason I pushed so hard at that was because I had been told that I wouldn't be able to. But I think that, and to sort of brush on the elephant in the room, being a trans person who didn't know that I was trans at the time, I think that I felt very out of place. And so sports were a great way for me to both show off my kind of perceived masculinity that I was trying to opt into, because sports tend to be perceived as something that is more masculine.
Sure.
And it was a combination of that, going, doctors being like, well, you're not going to be good at that, and me going, well, I have to be good at that because I'm a man, or a 7-year-old boy. So I think it was a combination of a lot of things now looking back that played into that I never really processed at the time.
So Before we talk about a little bit more about swimming, and then we can kind of get into mountain bikes, you mentioned like looking back on it and talking about some of that hindsight. You already made mention of vaccinate your kids. We're also talking about a lot of medical bills, and in America, that's a completely different story for a family that has a kid growing up with, hitting out of pocket maxes every year and paying through the nose for healthcare and all of the things that we deal with here. So looking back on it, or even currently, I don't know if you've had conversations with your parents about this, but about the toll that it took on your parents, about your family as a whole, with you going through all of these things and kind of always being, not that you were the kid in the bubble but you were always kind of a high risk child. And then all of these near misses or just in and outs of the hospital where it's a very, very serious, dire occurrence. Like what was the toll that it took on your family?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, we're very lucky in New Zealand that we have public healthcare. So it was a lot of these, hospital stays. So going to Starship, being in ICU and all that kind of stuff, it was no financial toll on them. I was lucky that because of how well my family was, I was able to pursue other, I guess, private healthcare-based support for my condition. So we found that I had some allergies as a kid, which, although not bad allergies, they were exacerbating the problem. So we were able to cut those foods out, and that helped reduce things. And I think that's really epitomized in the fact that, at least in New Zealand, and at the time of my last appointment with the hospital, there had been no undiagnoses. Like, no one had ever been undiagnosed with bronchiectasis. It was viewed as a lifelong condition because in New Zealand, it primarily appears in low socioeconomic families who live in homes where they don't have adequate heating. There are issues with mold and, things which are really conducive to pneumonia, which is a key driver of this condition. So for me, the fact that I was privileged growing up was already kind of out of the norm for this, and that allowed that when I was 16, I was actually undiagnosed with the condition because I had done all these sports. I had had access to the knowledge to go, okay, well, these are the things we can do to help support the recovery of this condition. And I think my parents played a really big role in that. I think some parents may have just gone, oh, well, this is it. Whereas my mum has a history in the medical field as well, and dad also in dentistry. So they kind of had some experience with this area already. I think that allowed them to push things. I think that I was never really aware of how much of a toll it had on them emotionally until the last couple of years. So when I broke my neck at Worlds in 2019, that's when things kind of came up a bit between me and them, because they'd put so much effort into keeping me alive as a child to have me
throw yourself down a mountain.
Yeah. It definitely caused some, I guess, tension between me and them about what I wanted to do with my life, whereas, them having this kind of unresolved stress that they had dealt with through all of my young life.
I think that's interesting, and I want to dig around that a little bit more when we kind of get to the space where we tell a little bit about 2019 and that accident, because I know that dramatically affected you, and I think it tells a lot about your story right now. But how did you even get to 2019? How did bikes? How did you go from swimming, like being dead last,
holding your breath
while swimming, dead last, right, trying to make it through the pond, and then finding bikes? What was the catalyst to bring bikes into your life outside of like what we all do, where we rip around with our neighbors, right? Like, what was kind of the thing for you in that space?
Yeah, a very non-linear journey, to say the least. I think that it is worth talking about the fact that although this lung condition really hampered me in my early life, it's kind of resulted in almost a bonus now with me as an adult, because I essentially had high altitude training for my entire young life. So I now have I guess, an increased lung efficiency as a result of that. Now, since then, I've done, lung capacity testing and VO2 max testing and that kind of thing. And it's actually had a really positive impact on me now that I've healed from that, because I dealt with all those hardships as a kid, but kind of pushed through them.
Are you recommending everyone get whooping cough?
No, absolutely. Yeah. If you have kids, it's just like, go find, it's like when you go to a chicken pox party, but instead of that, whooping cough and pneumonia, works a treat.
Perfect.
Yeah,
and the risks.
Yeah, they're fine. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
That's how you eliminate right there.
Yeah.
No, exactly. So that kind of meant that I had a bit of a predisposition towards endurance sports from the get-go, because I found them really easy. Things like cross-country running and stuff, although I didn't enjoy it very much, it was a kind of a natural area for me to go more into. So I'd always done a little bit of, riding around the home, and, when you go on holiday, you go down to the beach and that kind of thing. And in 2013, a new mountain biking track opened up in Taupo, and I just started riding it on my kind of crummy hardtail, and it involved a good hour of very chill climbing, and then you get to the top and there's a nice view, and then you turn around and you come back down the same track. And that was when I really first realized how much fun descending could be, particularly the feeling of going fast and hitting corners and that kind of thing. So that was through 2012. And then 2013, I had a friend at high school who was doing what he referred to as downhill, which was kind of not downhill. It was, put a full face on and go ride your bike down a couple of jumps in your backyard. And
I mean, that's downhill to me.
That's Cincinnati downhill is what that is.
Yeah. So he convinced me to give it a go. And within a year of riding real mountain biking trails, I had bought my first downhill bike and was racing. And at the time, I was racing in the under 19 field, which you can imagine, looking at the World Cups and the juniors, it is incredibly competitive. They are
they're all there now.
Really fast. Yeah. And
when, to be clear, New Zealand has a lot of fast juniors, and you produce a lot of fast people on the world stage. What was it like? How did you go, I think I'll show up for this race?
That's where I'm stuck right now. It's
this is wild.
Riding up a chill hill and coming down and being like, I like this. And then in under 18 months, you're competing at that level. My
first ever race was the Rotorua National Track, and it poured with rain. And I kid you not, it's a run that I could do in probably 2 minutes 50, 3 minutes now. And it took me 9 minutes to get down the track, walking many of the features. And I think it just really ticked all those boxes from when I was younger, of being just terrible at it, but so much fun. And that was something I hadn't seen in a lot of sports. Typically you do a sport, and if you're bad at it, it's like, well, I just tried really hard in this cross-country race, and I'm still awful. Whereas downhill, it was kind of it didn't matter how bad I was at it. It was just so much fun. I didn't really care. And the combination of that, but it's still being a sport. I was still going, and I was exerting myself and doing something physical. And it's crazy. Over the last 6 months, I've been looking back a lot at that first sort of few years of my riding career, because I'm coming up on a decade of riding now. And it just blows my mind, the fact that I pushed so hard so quickly, because I think coming into that under 19 field really impacted that a lot, because I've always been really competitive, and I sucked. I was really bad.
But I do get what you're saying, of it doesn't necessarily matter how, even if being competitive, right, it matters how good you are to other people. But you and I, Kate, are vastly different riders. And we can go ride the same thing and still get enjoyment out of it as long as it points down. If it's up, then it's a fitness challenge, and that's not good for me at all. But if it points down, even if we're vastly different in times, I can still enjoy myself in that space.
Totally.
I understand that feeling.
But it's like a jump, like a tabletop, right? A tabletop is fun, whether or not you're clearing it or you're landing halfway along the top of it. You're still jumping.
Yeah.
I think that's such an important part of like what makes gravity mountain biking just such a cool discipline of the sport is there is such a universally enjoyable experience about going down a hill.
So when does it, you make mention of kind of reliving the first couple of years where you just went really, really hard at trying to do it and to get better. And when does it go from, for you, being competitive against yourself and trying to get better while still having all of that fun? Because that's, I mean, I think that with gravity, it's very similar to, you know, road racing or things like that is, yeah, you push harder to, you know, train and do all of the work for road, and then you go faster. Whereas when you hit your technical, you know, you hit the turn right and you hit the backside of a jump and you can, you know, put your power down correctly, you can go faster downhill. It's just a different version of it. When did it go from being competitive against yourself to like engaging with competition? Like, as no, I want to go from, you know, last to top 20 to top 10 to top 5. Like, when did that transition happen? Was it a switch, or was it kind of a gradation as you continued to kind of fall more and more in love with this version of the sport?
I think it was a pretty quick period from me going, wow, this is a lot of fun. I just like riding down my hill. I think that after that first season in 2013, where I did 2 races, I then went and did national championships at the start of 2014. I think that was the first race where I was like, oh man, this is a serious sport, which people take seriously. I remember, I think George Brannigan won that race. So it was a race with all the big names attending and seeing people like Brooke and Blinky there, and having that perspective that I didn't have at these more local events really set the tone that actually this is something you could really strive to be really good at. And so I started pushing harder. And I think it was less a case of me necessarily wanting to win or to beat anyone. I think it was more that I wanted to be as good as the people I saw around me in a very almost abstract way. Like people often ask me that, oh, do you have someone who you compare yourself against, or you've always wanted to beat them, a teammate or someone you raced on the domestic circuit? And honestly, basically no, because it was always this sort of, well, I want to be the best I can be on this track. And I have the reference point of all these other people who are better on this track than me. They're riding the features faster. They're hitting the jumps better. And I go, well, like, that's what's possible.
Right.
I want to be there, and I want to be better than that. And I think that's kind of how I've conceptualized my journey through downhill and now enduro, is that it's not about necessarily beating anyone. It's about going, well, how fast can I get down the track? And as long as someone is doing it faster than me, that proves that there is a faster way to get down the track. And that's what I should be aiming for.
Sounds like we're talking about race cars right now. I'm just thinking of so many people that I've known in my life that talk about, putting a qualifying lap together in a race car, and they point out specific drivers in specific corners. And they say, well, if I could do, turns 1 and 7, like Doug, and do turns, 2 through 4, like Kate, I'm going to put a hell of a lap together. And it just shows you what's like, okay, they can go through their 2 miles an hour faster than me. That means that I can go through their 2 miles an hour faster than I'm going.
Totally.
Like, showing you what is actually possible. And I love that. Like, that's not that dissimilar of a mindset to kind of why you got into doing sports as a kid. Like it's like
aspirational in a competitive.
I could get there,
competitive, but non-competitive in a way. You're like, it's achievement based as opposed to destroying the competition.
Like I want to nail it.
like, it's crazy. I always get asked, like, oh, do you hate losing? Do you hate it? This is crazy. I like getting beaten by people because it proves to me that I could be faster. I could be better. And that's like when I went and started racing World Cups, before that point, I was essentially the best female downhiller in New Zealand. And it kind of negatively impacted my relationship with the sport because I knew that I was never going to be able to be as strong as the men who I was racing with. And so they felt very out of reach. But when I started racing the World Cups and I saw these girls who I knew that I could be as fast as them, going faster than me, that really just, yeah, I hate to say it, but it's like, it's fun getting beaten because it pushes me to be a better
turns up the
athlete.
wick, turns up the heat.
But I think that's something that personally, like as somebody coming to gravity from, my introduction into bike racing was more through road and then cyclocross and then cross country and then discovering gravity. The one thing that after watching the first, I forget which one was the first one that I watched from Red Bull, to see everybody when they would get knocked off the hot seat, just be so stoked for the person that just kicked them off. Like it was so foreign for everything that I had ever seen in bike racing. And I feel like when they get interviewed, when they go into second, they'd be like, oh, just so like, I'm so blown away by how they did this section of the course. Like it's very similar to what you're saying. You're like, shit, I didn't know you could go that fast. That was amazing.
Yeah, I think it's really, it epitomizes the idea that like in downhill and enduro, we're racing the track, not each other. We're racing our ability to ride down there. And you're totally right. There have been runs where I've seen, other girls ride sections of track and I go, oh my God, like, how did you do that? And I'm not going, oh my God, I'm gutted that you did that. And I didn't. I'm going, that's incredible. I want to be able to do that. Right. I think that there is such a cool culture of camaraderie among the top riders in gravity mountain biking in a way that I've never experienced in any other sport, where everyone's so genuinely happy for each other, which is so cool, even at that highest level.
I think as a fan of it and someone who dabbles in it personally, right? Like it's like I can throw myself down a hill, but like as a fan of it, like we all aspire to be able to ride like, like Brannigan or or Blanky. Like I want to be able to do that. I know I can't achieve that, but it is aspirational and I learn things from them. And I think that's very cool that's kind of the reference. It's cool to hear someone who has been a professional and has worked at that high level of sport still feel that way, because I think that's something that we all miss in our professional careers. Right. And as we do other things, we lose that narrative of, oh, I could be better at that if I took that cue from you, or if I learned how you navigated this meeting or whatever. Yeah, it's a good perspective.
It's like I like that idea of comparing it kind of to The Office, because you never want to be the smartest person in the room.
No,
like you always want to surround yourself with intelligent people, because they're all going to make you better and you're going to make them better. Like it is that. And that's so shit. It's so rare. Like it's so rare to actually find people that, whether if it's in a competitive environment or if it's in a competitive office environment, to where people can actually be comfortable enough in their own egos to be able to accept those things and just be like stoked when they can open up that, oh my God, the ceiling is 0.3 faster than I thought it was, or that, we can hit 10% over our budget goal versus what I thought we were going to get at 1%. I thought we were going to do great. And it's like, no, you can do a lot more. And it's so like, that's why I feel like there's such a magnetism towards gravity mountain biking specifically, because it is that, because it is just, it's yes, it has its like levels of insanity, and there's it's hard to wrap your head around how difficult and complicated it is. But when you interview every athlete and every mechanic and every person that's there, it's such a supportive and all encompassing and enveloping environment that it is that just like, okay, here's the track for the week. Let's see who can like
go for it,
throw themselves down at the fastest. And like, how do you use all of your tools in your toolkit to do that? And watching it from both sides of the both, you know, men and women and all of the juniors, and being able to see all of that and learn from everybody. Like I wish a lot more sports and a lot more kind of business cultures could take some of that advice and bring it to the boardroom as well.
Totally.
So you, during this campaign, and you said this before, it's the elephant in the room, and I don't think it's the elephant in the room, but during this campaign of getting really involved in mountain biking, you began your transition. And before you actually switched racing from, racing as a woman, you had begun your transition before that point in time and were competing with the men. And, there are plenty of people who do that. I think that's Molly Cameron is one that comes to mind here in the United States, very active in that space, but also has chosen to race in the men's field. What was that experience as you began your transition in that space? And what was the thing that kind of made you say, okay, now I'm ready to make that decision to move into the women's space? What kind of triggered that decision? Because I think a lot of people would have just said, you know what, I don't want all the other pieces that are definitely going to come from this decision, which is going to be public. What was the thing that really pushed you to make that decision with your racing career? Because you'd already made that decision for yourself personally, without a doubt.
Yeah, so I started medical transition in 2015. So that was going on hormone blockers and then going on hormone replacement therapy. And at that point, I'd been in the mountain biking community long enough to know that it was not, at least in New Zealand, the most accepting community of people who existed outside of the cisgender and heterosexual kind of normative viewpoint of the world. People were very readily making quite homophobic jokes, and it was already a really male-dominated sport. So I knew that it was not going to be an environment that was super accepting of the fact that this is something I was doing with my life. But for me, a transition was critical to my quality of life going forward. But I also didn't want to give up the mountain biking. So for a long time, I really kept those two parts of my life separate. And that was the goal, but it was really tough because this is also around the time that I started getting some good results in the men's field, starting to get some top 10s given in the amateur field when, men's World Cups are way out of reach, absolutely regardless. But I was definitely starting to improve, and I thought that it was possible that I could be one of the better, at least domestic riders in New Zealand. But as I started my transition, I had this really interesting experience of upping my training, starting to go to the gym, doing purposeful riding to improve rather than just riding for fun at the same time as I was starting this transition, and being fitter and stronger, but also not. It was a really interesting experience where my body really changed as I became more of an athlete, but my times weren't improving, my lifts in the gym had stagnated and plateaued. And it was really tough because I knew that I was getting better as a rider. My quartering skills were improving, my jumping was improving. There were all these things, the technical side of the sport that I was still improving at. But my ability to make improvements in terms of my fitness and strength was getting harder and harder. And that was really tough for me going through that period. And so I kind of like to say, I kept those two parts of my life separate, but it was impossible to.
Yeah.
And so as I went through my medical transition and kept riding in the men's field, eventually in, I think, the end of 2017, at the start of the New Zealand season, so around September 2017, I was outed in the mountain biking community, which at the time was really awful, but I think it's so hard to try and keep two aspects of your life separate that it was honestly bound to happen. And because I wanted to wait until a time where I felt that I was female enough that the mountain biking community would accept me, and at that point, that's when I would changeover, because at the time I'd already been talking to Cycling New Zealand, and had got them to put a policy in place for trans athletes based on the IOC policy. And I knew that there was, I guess, a regulatory backboard for me to fall back against. It wasn't just me going in. It would be like, well, actually, there's regulation, there are rules around this decision process. If you have an issue, you need to talk to the UCI, the IOC, and Cycling New Zealand. It's not me directly.
And kudos to you for making sure that piece was there, because that's critical, right? Like that's a little bit of cover your ass CYA, right? Making sure you're keeping that stuff in check. So kudos to you.
Yeah. So, but in hindsight, I never would have been female enough or woman enough to really be accepted by everyone. I think that it was somewhat of a naive perspective from my point to go, oh, if I just pass, or if I'm visually perceived as a woman, everyone's just going to be like, yep, this is fine. It was, I guess, a positive ignorance, but me hoping.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of, I'm sure that there's a lot of hindsight talking about that, but in the moment, how do you deal with having that decision be made for you? Like some things that's so personal to you that you've probably been mulling over multiple times a minute, every hour since you've started your process, to then have kind of that final, not that it's a checkpoint, but like that final, like, this is who I am, this is who I've always been, have that be taken away from you. Like, I'm sure your answer today is completely different than what your answer was at that point. So like,
no,
what's the difference between now and then?
Yeah, it was definitely tough. I think that I look back on it now more positively than I definitely would have at the time, because I think that it was, in the most eloquent of terms, the kind of kick up the ass I needed to actually, because at this point I'd already been meeting the IOC's rules for what constitutes a female athlete for, I think, 2 years at that point. So in the eyes of the sporting regulations, I should have been competing in the women's field for a long time. At that point, it was this, I guess, trepidation about not wanting to alienate the community that I built around myself. And I do look back at that, and there is some, I guess, melancholy around that there are people who I considered really close friends and part of my riding community at the time, who I now no longer really have any kind of relationship with them, whether or not that's because they disagreed with the fairness of me competing and became to resent me because of that, or because they simply knew me as a boy and could never deal with the idea that I was now a woman. And that change, I find there are a lot of people who just don't know how to think about you and deal with you if they don't understand trans people. I think that it can be difficult for people. They just go, I don't understand this. I don't know what's going on. This is weird. I'm just not going to deal with this. And a lot of people just stop talking to me.
But that's on their end, not on yours, which I mean has to give you a little bit of reprieve from that. But I can understand how there is melancholy around that, because anytime we lose community that we have built, it is hard, and it is hard to expose oneself honestly, regardless of the situation, but far more in this situation when you have things that professionally to a large extent rely on that community. And that's really where you were at the pointy end of this sport at that point in time.
Yeah, and there's definitely been a big period of time over the last couple of years where I've really had to rebuild that sense of community, getting new friends and even reconnecting with old friends who I haven't really had a friendship with for a long time. I think that going overseas and racing was a bit of a double-edged sword, because it introduced me to a lot of new people and I've made a lot of new friends as a result of that. But I think it also alienated a lot of people because a lot of people saw me as this sort of fellow domestic rider who is, not that great, but not bad either. And I think there is a big kind of this middle of the sport group of riders in New Zealand who are really good. They can hit all the features on a track, but they're never going to be competitive enough to be able to race at a World Cup or be a professional in the sport. And I think a lot of people didn't have the context of the fact that when I was in this mid-range, the sort of average level in the sport, I was already on hormone blockers and dealing with the ramifications of essentially changing my body's phenotype, from a male phenotype to a female phenotype. And people just didn't have that point of reference. So to suddenly go from this middle of the road athlete to one of the best athletes in New Zealand and then subsequently one of the best athletes in the world was really jarring for a lot of people. And I think that has also played a role in that sort of loss of community that I've experienced, is not having the natural progression that people see of a junior who starts getting good at the sport and then gets some support from some people around them and maybe goes overseas a couple of times. And particularly in downhill, we have this natural progression of an athlete. And the perception was that I didn't go through that natural progression, which is somewhat true, that I had an atypical journey to sort of my top level in the sport.
But you would have had a typical journey had you denied yourself. Had you denied the person that you are, you would have had the typical journey because you had the talent and the capability to be at that pointy edge in the men.
So let me ask this. So I'm going to put a link to the Pink Blue White podcast that you were on and shared a lot of more nuanced conversation about kind of this time period of your life. But you're somebody that's been very, very open in sharing your story. And I want to ask if you feel like it's interesting hearing, I'm trying to formulate this correctly, because it's interesting hearing you talk about, it seems like you're carrying some of the burden for losing some of those relationships when all of this kind of shook itself out. Which it's very high, like it's very high emotional, like IQ on your part. But since you've watched and you've experienced a lot of these things happening, do you feel that incumbent upon you to be open and to be a beacon and to tell this story, to not necessarily unravel what you were just talking about how it's a very jagged road to the top of where you are, and it's not the linear path that most people expect, but do you feel that for your own truth that you feel like you need to be that, or is it just that you saw an outage and you felt like you were the person to fill that outage? Like I'm trying to understand what gives you the strength and the gumption to go be so open and continually put yourself in the limelight to just have a comment section. It really, like, to sum it up,
to not turn commenting off on Instagram,
to continuously
be Fuck you.
Continuously be in situations where there is a comment section where dumbass stuff is going to be said by people that are ignorant and don't understand that this person that we're talking to now is who you've always been and who you are.
Yeah, I think that it is worth mentioning that I am a textbook people pleaser, just very like to be liked. And
I do not identify with you at all.
Yeah, so I think that it's a part of it is that I don't like being perceived as a villain. I think that has definitely pushed me to go put myself out there and have these conversations as going, well, I'm uncomfortable with the idea of just doing my own thing and pursuing ahead if that means alienating people and creating animosity towards me. As an athlete or just as a person in general, I would much rather take the approach of creating empathy and understanding in those around me and building up rapport, whether or not that's in in my academic life, in my now medical engineering professional life, or in my cycling life. I think there is genuinely too much hate in the world, and I think that positivity can make things a lot better. And I found that often people's transphobia or ignorant viewpoints come from a place of a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding. And being angry at someone or ignoring them is not going to correct that lack of knowledge. I think that, we've seen that really highlighted in the world over the last couple of years, particularly in America, dealing with the ramifications that have occurred through the various presidencies and also the sort of global socio-political climate. I think has shown us a lot that if we argue, things don't typically get better. And so the way that I've tried to approach this issue is by going, how can I be as open and understanding to the perspectives of the people who have an issue with me, to try and address their concerns and have an open discussion. And a lot of the time it just doesn't work. It doesn't matter how understanding I am to their perspective, they see it as a threat. I think that's really epitomized, and particularly the women who I've raced against who've had an issue with me competing. I think that women in sports, we have such a hard time getting to a high level in the sport already, not just because of obviously the physical barriers, that things like recovery is reduced because of lack of testosterone, and there are all these things that make it harder to be a good athlete, but also there are all the social blocks, the fact that you are not expected to be an athlete, or that it is not the default. So there is, social pressure from a very early age that you're expected to, for a lot of women, be a housewife, have kids.
Yeah.
Even as professional athletes, women are asked, so when you're going to have kids, are you going to retire? How is that going to factor into your plan? Which is something that's never asked of men, when maybe the physical toll on women through pregnancy is more, but men should be just as responsible for kids as women should be if they have them. Regardless, it's an important discussion to have. And so a lot of women, I think, feel like they have to push so hard to get to the top of a sport. And when they see someone who they perceive as a threat coming in to make it even harder for them to reach the top, taking at a downhill World Cup, there are 15 qualifying spots for women. And that means that, my maths is bad, but it's like every spot is like 10% of the field. And
right.
That's a big missed opportunity. So one spot, it can be really awful if you qualify 16th and there's someone in that top 15 who you think shouldn't be there, or there's even any questions about it. I can understand how easy it would be to resent that person. And I want to deal with that in a way that doesn't just go, oh, well, that's your problem, that's on you. I think that as women in professional sports, as I said before, we have such a hard time already. We should be coming together to mutually support each other. And that's the perspective and, I guess, values that I want to bring to these discussions that I have, not this sort of shutting down of any dissenting person.
And isn't that kind of analogous to how like you approach downhill, right? Like how you approach that community. It's analogous to this space of, oh, I can be better. We're all better together. It's not a tearing down, it's a lifting up.
Absolutely.
It's an approach. And it's missed in so many spaces that it isn't a knock on anyone just because we've all had different paths to a space. We're all just trying to get along and lift each
figure
other
it out, man.
Yeah, just trying to like somehow put tomorrow
Just
together.
Figure out what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I love that is your approach, because I think that, and it's not for everyone. And I think that it is something unique about your story and your time and your process that has made that the way that you approach it. And I love that it is the way you approach it, because I think that it is important for people in all spaces to be able to hear each other. And I love that you're like, no, look, I understand your fears, your challenges are legitimate from the way that you learned things, not necessarily legitimate on the face of if we were to do a moral test, but legitimate in the way that you have gotten here from the perspective of the world and the way it's given things to you. And I love that you approach it from that. When you look at all this stuff and, you know, you're here still competing in mountain biking, you know, do you ever feel like the rug will be pulled out from underneath you?
I think not really. I think a big part of that is because at the end of the day, whether or not I'm competing at a high level and winning races at a World Cup or domestically, whatever, it's all just kind of riding bikes. And I love riding bikes in whatever capacity that takes. So hypothetically, let's say something like what's happened with British cycling occurs, where they put a ban on trans athletes in place, whether or not that's permanently or for a period of time, or they rejig their policies. For me, I would push back against that and try to shift things again, because we need those social change when decisions that are uneducated and ignorant are made. But at the end of the day, that's not ever going to stop me. No one's going to be able to stop me going and getting on my bike and going and riding. And I think that there is a huge degree of freedom that bikes give us, is that part of the benefit of being an individual sport is we don't have a team that we have to go and compete with. There's no opposition for us to compete against. You know, whether or not my team accepts me, say the opposition, if they were not willing to compete, it's kind of hard to play football if you're the only one on the field. But
right, yeah, it's a real boring game.
Yeah, but you can go and you can mountain bike, and you could essentially do a World Cup downhill run. You go to Leogang and you could ride the same track the pros do. And you could try and go as fast as they do. And I think that is, although mountain biking isn't the most accessible sport in the world, I think that element of it is really accessible. And something that I love about it is that, you know, whether there are races or not, you can still ride your bike fast.
Yeah.
So, okay, Kate. So the next question after this one is going to be about you breaking your neck. So we're going to come back to that one. But for all of the athletes that we've had on our show, when they are getting paid to ride bikes, the impression that and Doug, you can disagree with me with this one. The impression that I've gotten from them is that their professional career is going to be pulled from them, from their cold, dead hands, like that very dramatic. They're going to hold on to it with all of their might, and they're going to do everything that they can to do it on their terms. And I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to it's not going to be something that that is going to be taken away from them, which it inevitably is, like in a performative sport like this. That's just the way that it is. How on earth are you in the middle of your professional career and you're talking as though not that this doesn't matter to you? Like it is clear that this matters a lot, and you're very passionate about what you do and you want to be the best at it. But for somebody like yourself who is capable of winning World Cups, world championships, to say, this is all just riding bikes and I can enjoy just riding my bike without having timing and scoring and money on the line, and have just as much fun. What what do you think about you gives you that perspective to have that level of understanding how fickle this whole, professional sporting world is?
Yeah, because John and I can't figure this out and we're slow.
Yeah. And I think that it's impossible to have this conversation without talking about me breaking my neck at Worlds, because that was the, I guess, linchpin incident that shifted my focus from downhill to enduro. And
Look at that, John. Look at that, John.
I did a transition without even
planning it. Perfect.
Yeah. And this is not something that I guess, publicized as effectively as I think I maybe should have through my social media channels, but that process, that transition was incredibly challenging. I had conceptualized my identity as a cyclist around being a downhiller, and I had got to near the pinnacle of being a downhiller. I had 2 World Cup podiums and a long-term professional career in downhill ahead of me, and then it was gone. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's having the rug pulled out from under you. And that was a really challenging process, because I didn't know if I would ever be able to, not even talking about competing, but if I would ever be able to be the kind of athlete that I had been ever again. And I would say that I'm not. I think that now I'm a very different athlete to who I was when I was racing downhill. If we're talking purely physiologically, I'm nowhere near as strong as I was then. Endurance is a much bigger part of what I do now. I got to be able to ride all day and not just go down the hill as fast as I possibly can, but things like my low speed tech skills have improved. And there are all these other things that come with a change of discipline. But that was a really difficult journey for me to go through, going, well, okay, I've just had an accident which could have very easily killed me. It was a C1 fracture, so right at the top. And if that had damaged my spinal cord at that height, I think that it would have been death or on a ventilator for the rest of my life.
Yep.
And that really makes you reconsider things. And I still love doing downhill. I still go and do domestic downhill races for fun. But I think that I have some grievances with the direction that downhill is going in as a professional sport. I think the tracks, the danger of them is potentially too high when there are risks like that. I think that Mont Saint Anne, which is the track that I broke my neck at, really epitomizes that, because it's such a, not necessarily the most technically demanding track on the circuit, but is really high risk if something does go wrong. And I wasn't comfortable with that. I think there are a lot of athletes who are, and I would love to go back and ride those tracks for enjoyment, but there's a very different level between going and racing and having fun and trying to be the absolute fastest down that track on the day. And so for me, enduro is kind of the good middle ground that goes, well, how can I still get that enjoyment of working on being fast and pushing myself and being this gravity athlete, but in a capacity where there is kind of less risk, I think. And obviously with any sport, there is risk, but it's going, I'm not hitting 60-foot jumps in an enduro race or those kinds of features where a very small mistake can result in a really big negative outcome. And so I had to really spend a lot of time processing that shift. And what I realized is that there is so much enjoyment that can be gained out of that change that occurs from the rug being pulled out from underneath you. Like it's nuts. I ride in Rotorua pretty often, which I used to train there all the time for doing downhill because it's probably one of the best downhill tracks in the North Island is there.
Oh yeah.
They have a shuttle uplift
probably
service.
one of the, I mean, like, and they don't get over there enough, but like probably one of the best in the world. Like definitely top 10.
Yeah. So, and I used to do a very little bit of pedaling in the forest just to kind of get some fitness, but it was mostly there was to do downhill. I now willingly do not shuttle. I willingly pedal up the shuttle road. I'll have mates who will go and they will sit in the queue for the shuttle and I'll go, bye, I'm pedaling up, and I'll ride up without them.
Good for you.
And I get such a kick now out of just being fit. And it's that going, okay, I can't be this athlete that I once was, but that doesn't mean I'm not an athlete. That doesn't mean that I can't ride bikes at all. Like it's not that if I can't do this type of riding bikes are off the cards. It's actually, you can gain so much out of taking what you learned in one aspect of the sport and applying it to another. And I think that, I don't know if I'll ever be the best enduro athlete in the world. I want to race EWS and want to keep pursuing that and be the best that I can be. But I also now have a separate career, which I'm trying to manage. And I think for me, I dealt with a lot of guilt while I was racing downhill around the fact that being a professional athlete is incredibly selfish. Everyone in your life around you has to support you, and you have so little time for anything but the sport that you're doing. And not to mention the fact that for me, and I have no judgments of other professional athletes, but I felt that I really wanted to be able to give back to the world in some way. I struggled with the idea that essentially as a professional athlete, I was a entertainer and a salesperson of products. That's essentially what makes the world of professional sports work.
Yep.
And although there are people who've made that work and made really positive shifts in the world, like with Elliot Jackson and the Grow Foundation and what they're doing, things like that, there are these positive ways that people can use their platforms to make a really big shift. Even things like what Lewis Hamilton's doing in Formula One with using his platform to discuss social issues. For me, I didn't know how to do that in the sport where I was at, whereas now working in the industry that I'm in, although it's completely separate from cycling, I know that I'm, making products which help people and are making a social change whilst also being the best athlete that I can be and managing those two things at the same time.
So
she's covered like 4 transitions.
It's perfect. It's perfect because you've gotten me through them. This is why you're a professional. Let's talk a little bit about your professional career outside of cycling right now, because I think this is an interesting tie into where we started. You are you have your master's in design and engineering, right? You have to give me exactly what it is, but you work in a medical products company and you are an engineer. Like you have a day job that is built around trying to solve problems to help people. Why this? Why was this what you decided to pursue?
Yeah, it was ironic. So I did my undergraduate degree in industrial design, which is sort of like engineering, but a bit more on the kind of aesthetics and usability side of things.
This toaster looks cool.
Yeah,
this is a cool looking toaster.
Yeah, exactly. So I did that because I wanted to go into the cycling industry. I was going, well, if the whole riding bikes things professionally falls through, I can design bikes. And in the last year of my undergrad, I had the opportunity to work with a dental research team on developing a device that could deliver local anesthetic in a dental setting without using a needle, which was incredible. So essentially use jet injection.
Can you tell my wife about this? She would be excited.
Can you tell my dentist from when I was a kid about this thing?
Well, that's exactly it, is how many kids are traumatized by dentists who jam needles in their faces. So
ask your dad, right? Your dad knows, right?
Had his wisdom teeth taken out with local anesthetic.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it opened my eyes to the possibilities of design and engineering in a non non-consumer based world, this kind of social, like design and engineering for social good.
Yeah.
And so once I finished my undergrad, I then raced bikes for a while, broke my neck, came back home, COVID happened, and I'm going, oh my God, what am I going to do with myself?
Right.
Everything is on fire.
Yeah. I cannot move. I'm only allowed to turn my whole body. This is how this works. Can I look at a computer screen? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, screw it. I'll do my master's. As everyone does when they're in a hard place, you decide, I'll go back to university.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went back to the same university I did my undergraduate degree at the Auckland University of Technology. And we're really lucky that the university has a really great relationship with one of the district health boards in Auckland. And so I was able to do a project working with an outpatient intravenous antibiotic service run out of the hospital. So essentially it's a service that sends people home who've had really bad infections and allows them to have IV antibiotics at home rather than in the hospital. But the system had a lot of issues. It was very understaffed, and the products that were being used to deliver the service were kind of pulled from other areas of the medical field and brought together to deliver an effective therapy, but not a optimized therapy. And it's particularly a therapy that did not account for some of the accessibility issues that some of the patients in the service needed. These are a lot of older patients who have issues with arthritis or mobility and that kind of thing. And when you're dealing with IV connectors and having to tape IV lines to your own arm every day, it's really challenging. And that was an amazing project. So I did that through 2020 and then into 2021. And it really just, I guess, sparked this love for creating products that help people, and being able to take those products that I design and go back and talk to patients and clinicians and see the positive impact that had on them was just, really, really incredible. And I think linked back a lot, as you said earlier, to my own childhood growing up in and out of medical facilities and being in hospital so much. I had a real, I guess, firsthand understanding of how garbage it is to spend a lot of time in hospital and sick. And when you're sick, everything already sucks. And the things that support you to get better shouldn't also suck. And so I didn't know, this is when I'm going through the same transition of going from downhill to enduro. I didn't know what I was doing with myself at that point. And I go, well, actually, I really struggled with the idea of only being a professional athlete. And I know that there are athletes out there who manage to do other careers outside the cycling world and cycling. And that was something that I wanted to do. And I was lucky enough to get a job at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, which is a company based out of New Zealand, but we ship products all over the world and work primarily with respiratory support. So a lot of lungs.
Well, I will tell you this: you are in good company, because I think that almost all the athletes that hold down a full-time day job, PhD, all that jazz, they're all women, because the men can't possibly figure that out. So you are
it's multitasking,
right? No, whatever it is, like, you're in good company, because I don't know. I mean, how many PhD women have we had on this show? Like a lot. And
it's probably easier to answer how many PhD men have we had.
Right. That probably a very small number, for sure. Because I think there's this capability for high achieving people to be able to achieve more than one thing. And I love that that's where your heart is to think about, how can I do more with the gifts I have, rather than just put all my eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Well, and it's, and
totally.
You said it, that professional sport, especially on two wheels, like we all love, is incredibly selfish. So it's cool that you're figuring out how to balance making, your own personal pursuits and having those as like, these are the things that are for me. This is what I want to go do to push myself and to continue to like explore this version of this thing that I love, but also pursuing something that is a core passion. And it's, the dent that you leave in the cycling world could probably be measured, but I think the dent that you're able to leave from the professional world that you're entering right now is going to be much greater. So if you're thinking about it from a, what are you leaving behind, and what's, talking about the L word of legacy is what's your legacy going to be in this world, and how many things are you going to contribute that are good and positive versus, personal pursuits, and they both have their value, but swinging the pendulum, which one of them is more valuable to you, and then figuring out how to balance both of them. Because I mean, there's a lot of folks and we kind of talked about it with the whole boardroom thing, where they're so hell-bent on pursuing work and pursuing career that they forget the selfish endeavors and the things that make them more well-rounded. And then there's the other end of the spectrum. And I think that's kind of where we all go back to this. We're just trying to figure it out every day. And I'm just trying to figure out what makes me happy and what makes me tick, and figure out how to balance those things to where you can do EWS, you can go to Rotorua if you want to, and you can enjoy that, and you can have that thing that you love have its place,
and be supportive of the other things you're doing, and not exist in a vacuum.
Yeah. And carve out the space to do both of those things and have, and be well-rounded. I mean, how many pro athlete, like how many athletes have we had on our show that are like actually trying to be a well-rounded human?
I will not. It's been a lot. It's been a lot of shows.
It's a philosophical question. I mean,
we will not answer this on this episode of the Gravel Lot, because this requires research, and I don't want to speak either way. No, but
I think a lot of that goes back to what you were saying about. It's interesting, Doug, that you asked the question about having the rug pulled out, and then we start to talk to Kate about you breaking your neck, and you're using the phrase having the rug pulled out, and how it's going to be interesting to see how that specific period in your life ages, because it seems like it's become an inflection point of change for you of, okay, is like, who would Kate have become had that not happened, and you raced the next day and then the next year and COVID happened, and like, is that specific occurrence going to be your, what was the part in Back to the Future where they like drew the two parallel timelines? I forget. There's like a name for it. I'll just stick with inflection point because I'm dummy. But like, is that going
I do think about that a lot. It's like, what would happen had I finished that run and competed at World Champs and gone on to race snowshoe that year? And and it is hard, because I love the career that I'm in now. I think that it is so important, the work that I'm doing, but I also love riding bikes, and I feel like the ability for me to be able to balance those two things is so important. I think that I'm definitely a more well-rounded person now than I ever was while I was just racing downhill.
Well, you're also, here's the thing, you're figuring out this lesson a way lot earlier than most people do. So kudos to you, because most people don't figure this out until
they're like 65
and they're like, oh my Lord, I done screwed it all up.
My knees hurt and I can't do what I want to do now.
Right.
My knees already hurt.
Well, that's just part and parcel for your activity of throwing yourself down hills. So you're going to have to deal with that one. We can't solve that one for you.
Yeah.
No, I think your story up to this point has just been so interesting from the perspective of how you've developed through it. And I know that, like, I'm glad we've got the introduction to you and got to meet you, because you're a captivating person. You have so many things going on, and we know that you as a person are going to leave a legacy in this world because you're doing it every day. And that's, I think, what we all hope and strive to do in some fashion, whether we admit that we want to leave a legacy or not. We all are kind of looking to do that. And so I love just following along with your story and the things you do and supporting the stuff you do and watching you evolve as a person and as an athlete. Like, that is all of us. And I think if everyone can like get on the point of watching other people evolve with a positive mindset and saying, oh, we're all evolving.
How
together.
do I do that corner faster?
Yeah, right. And I love your posts because like all the stuff you've been posting lately is like, all right, so what I realized is my entry speed was too hot. I could do this Euro turn this way, or I could do this thing. And I love that you're approaching it in that way because it is very transparent and open for all of us to access and lets us know that you're just kind of, going through those same motions we all are every single day. And I love that you're so open in that space from at least your social media space to give everybody that perspective. So, well, look, we know we've taken a lot of your time today. We're going to pay some bills and do all that stuff. We've had an awesome conversation. You know what we're going to ask you at the end of this, which is what you want the Pebbles, our fine listeners, all Pebbles in the gravel lot, to take away with them. So you ruminate on that. John and I are going to quickly pay the bills, and then we'll let you get about your lovely Wednesday. Is it Wednesday?
Wednesday. Yeah.
Okay, it's Wednesday in New Zealand. I don't know what day it is today in America.
I hardly know what day it is.
Yeah, it's fine. It's COVID. No one really understands.
All I know is it's not March 2020 anymore. Somebody told me that last week. I need to stop saying that, but
it is definitely not March.
Crazy.
No, it still kind of feels like March 2020 in some aspects.
Is it April 2020?
It's definitely April 2020. Yeah. People have just decided that we don't need masks on planes. Okay. Any rate, as we wrap up the show today, one more chance to thank all of you for being with us and listening, coming to join us here at the Gravel Lot. We love having you. All of you are the reason that we've been as successful as we have. We're so appreciative for all of you being here. We could not continue to bring this without your support. In addition to all of your support, we encourage you to go support all the fine folks who make us have the capability to bring this to you. All our partners, they're a big piece of what we do, and we're so thankful to all of them. So show them some love so we can continue to make this happen for you all every other week.
Yeah.
Every other week.
Whatever. So the first is Be Free Red Bike Cycling Apparel. You guys should know by now, it is personally tailored and customized kit to your needs. And we're not talking about just adding graphics to some jerseys where you get to pick a Euro fit or a Pro fit. You get to pick the fabrics. You get to pick the sleeve length. You get to pick how it fits you. Do you want a collar? Do you not want a collar? All of these things are customizable. There's like 7 different chamois for men and 7 different chamois for women that you can pick from. Like, it is truly personalized to get exactly what you want. So head to bfrbcycling.com and take a look at how they can help you and your entire team. Or if you're your team, go check it out and take a look at it and see what they can do for you, because there's some stuff you can buy right off the website, or you can get a hold of them and have something custom made.
Absolutely. And also, if you are looking for, a little perk me up this fine spring, because man, it's been cold in Ohio.
If it's Wednesday for somebody and it's Tuesday for you, and you need some caffeine,
you're trying to figure it out because you think you're in the future, but you're also in the past and you have no idea what's going on. Head on over to the link in our show notes and go visit Grimper Brothers Coffee, grimperbrothers.com. Dan, the entire crew over at Grimper Brothers, doing amazing things, delivering hand-roasted fine coffees to your door with love notes directly from Dan. And it's all coffee that not only is incredible and sustainably roasted, but also supports amazing causes in cycling and the greater world. Dan, yes, but first, coffee, always. You do the most amazing thing. You support amazing people in the world and try to give good to the world. So folks, if you want good coffee and you want to support good causes, go over to grimperbrother.com and sign up right now. And if you sign up for a year subscription service, you get an extra month for free. So do it right now. Get yourself some delicious coffee that gives back.
Doug, what's the only thing better than great coffee?
Free coffee.
There you go.
That's correct.
I trained you correctly. And last but not least is Hand Up Gloves, our oldest and probably going to be our last partner. And
when we're all in the grave,
when we're all in the grave, we're still going to be partnered with Hand Up Gloves because they.
Do I have to get buried with them? Is that like now part of this?
I could see you doing that.
Okay, yeah, I could definitely do it.
Really,
but I want my hands like this, so the message is said on the inside of them. Yeah,
you like the opposite. Yeah. Well, I mean, they kind of do that anyway with like the open cast. You would just have yours formed a little bit differently.
Yeah,
whatever. Just have to talk to the
Undertaker.
Yeah, the Undertaker. Yeah, the guy that puts your makeup on. Anyway, back to this sponsor read. Hand Up Gloves supplies you with multiple sports, with apparel in a range of colors and styles to fit your specific design taste. So whether it's bikes, winter sports, golf, summer clothing, casual wear, socks, outerwear, caps, accessories, you got belts, like all kinds of stuff.
Shirts.
So check it out. Click the link in the show notes. Use code Pebble $ at checkout to save 10% off everything in store. Just click the link in the show notes and go peruse it and see what Hand Up Gloves is all about, because there's, just like Dan and Grimper Brothers, there's so many gloves for good going on. There's so many things that they are getting involved in and really giving back to the greater world and not just selling and trying to make some money off of the bike industry. So great people doing amazing things.
Absolutely. Always huge thanks to everyone, all the Pebbles, old and new. We're so thankful for having you. Love hearing from all of you. Cannot continue to do this without you. As we said before, subscribe, follow, engage, visit our website, subscribe to all our social feeds, go to thegravelot.com, become a Patreon supporter and do all that stuff, and join us every other Tuesday. We're going to start dropping these a little differently. Thanks, YouTube. You're pretty excellent and allow us to do premieres. So we're going to start doing some different stuff. And we're putting a few in the can because
somebody's having a baby.
Baby Gravelot is coming. So we'll say baby Gravelot do baby Gravelot do.
The newest Pebble.
The newest Pebble is on their way. And we're super thankful for having you. So just stay tuned. We'll keep this sucker rolling during that time.
The intro and outro music for the Gravelot is brought to you from our great friend Water. So many thanks to him for the music. Check him out on all the major platforms. Obviously, the link is in the show notes. Go check it out. I think he's got a new album a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So go download the new music and have some great, I use it as chill vibe music for work when I need to get a bunch of stuff done.
It's perfect. It's good concentration music. So
yeah.
All right. So Kate, we got to get you back into your day because it's the middle of the day. We've had an interlude. So what would you like the Pebbles to take home from our conversation today?
I think the biggest thing is that discussion earlier around looking for ways that you can improve yourself, and looking at others and what they're doing as an opportunity to see how you could better yourself, not in that how you could be better than them, but rather what you can aspire to be. And that goes for if that's on the track, if looking at how best to do a turn, or if someone is just better at crunching numbers. I think that we can take that into all aspects of our life to strive to be better and improve ourselves with others.
I love it.
Yeah. Don't compare. Comparison is a thief of joy. Don't compare.
What's the opposite of compare? I don't know.
Embrace.
Oh, there you go.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
No,
you should have a podcast.
So here's the thing. I was talking with my brother the other day, and he was telling me how great he thinks Gary Vaynerchuk is. And I made the comment, and this is very true about podcasting, that if you talk enough in a day, eventually you're gonna say some words that sound good.
Yeah, broken clock.
Broken clock is right twice a day. Yeah.
Yep.
So if Gary V talks for 18 hours a day, or if we talk for an hour and 32 minutes here, some good stuff's gonna eventually fall out.
Has to.
Yeah. Just law of big numbers or words or something.
Well, I mean, from both of us, thank you for being here to help teach us how to have good words fall out of our head, and being part of good words falling out of our head.
Yes.
It's been an absolutely excellent time having you join us from halfway around the world. We have just been delighted to have you, and look forward to having you back where we can have far-ranging conversations. And now everyone knows your history. We can be like, go listen to episode 1.
Absolutely. I mean, I've said words. I mean, I should have a podcast.
Look, everyone else does.
We know people who can help you produce it.
The problem is I'm not a white man on the internet, so that kind of.
Ooh, we are. So
and you have a podcast.
It's true.
At least we acknowledge that. It's about once an episode where that, the fact that it is 2 white guys with a podcast, it does, we are at least aware of.
And
that.
I would love to be I would love to try to be a little we were here before them, a little hipster about it, but we weren't.
No,
we weren't.
At least we're not.
At least you're hosting people who aren't white guys on the podcast, so you're doing something right.
Well, we're trying to do that a lot more. So, Pebbles, send us your awesome guest requests. Like if you want to hear more guests who are as awesome as Kate, and you know people who have great stories, send them our way. We welcome everyone on the show. We just love having good people on. So, well, Pebbles, John, Kate, thanks for all being here. Pebbles, we appreciate y'all. You've been amazing. That's it for this week. So be sure to subscribe, follow, and engage, because as we say, decisions and trails are made by those who show up. So if we don't see you on the trails this week, we'll see you next time. Bye, John.
Bye, Doug.